Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sonia Williams. I'm the Renewable Energy Innovation Officer at the Inner West Council, and welcome to our Solar for Strata online information session. It's been great to see such a strong response to this council program. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we broadcast, the Gadigal and Wongal peoples of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, as well as all elders on the lands in which this broadcast is being watched. This is and will always be Aboriginal land. Today's session is brought to you by Council's Green Living Centre, which supports and empowers the Inner West community to live more sustainably by adopting a low carbon lifestyle. It does this by focusing on energy use, how we move around and the ways and how we consume types of electricity, waste, water, food systems, share economy and building materials. So why are we here today to talk about solar for strata? In the Inner West and in a metropolitan local government area, 44% of homes in our local government area are apartments, with trends that this is only going to continue to rise. And strata buildings in Australia consume about 7% of the national electricity grid, which is an equivalent of about $1.7 billion spent on electricity each year. But they are way behind in the rates of solar uptake at under 1%, around 0.6%, which is compared to 22% of standalone residential homes. So we've looked at in council what have been the challenges for owners in strata schemes to look at the best model for solar for their building once they've taken into account the physical characteristics of the building and the desires of the owner in the strata community. So the aim of this Solar for Strata program is to reduce the information and capacity barriers for strata committees, for residents and for strata managers, who until now really have relied on volunteer research to be able to engage with the market. So shortly I'll be handing over to our guest presenter, Brent Clark of Wattblock. Just some housekeeping before we start. We will be having questions at the end of Brent's presentation. If you have a burning question as we are going through, we invite you to write that down via the chat function. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see an icon that looks like a thought bubble. So that is the chat. And then we'll be batching those and feeding those questions through to Brent at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this. We're recording this session, so you do have the option of posting your question anonymously. And then we will also be running a series of 4 poll questions throughout the webinar. So I'll launch those and we really invite your feedback so we can get some interaction and get a better understanding of what your needs and information wants are for the program. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you Brent Clark. Brent is the CEO and founder of energy consultancy Wattblock. Wattblock has assisted apartment buildings housing over 60,000 residents with solar feasibility, energy efficiency and electric vehicle charging reports. Wattblock's projects include working for Advanced Queensland, the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry Environment, North Sydney, Lane Cove, Mossman and Wallara councils and the City of Ryde. Brent specialises in breaking down the barriers to solar for strata and apartment buildings. Welcome, Brent.
Thanks so much, Sonia, and it's great to be here. So today we've got a presentation that'll go through about 45 slides, and we're going to keep moving. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. These are the topics that we'll be going through, and let's jump straight into it. So first of all, on this slide, we've got a picture of what all 360,000 residential strata buildings in Australia should be aiming to become. And 2 key parts of the future-proofing of these apartment buildings are solar photovoltaic panels and also batteries. But these work in conjunction with with a lot of other technologies which will be coming into our buildings over time. Things such as electric vehicle charging and heat pumps for hot water. So why would we put solar on apartment buildings? First of all, it's a clean source of electricity. It's a way to lower the bills in potentially the common area or the individual apartments. When it's paired with batteries, it can increase energy security in the building. And by that, we mean the lift may be able to run during a power outage. It's a low cost form of power, which reduces our fossil fuel reliance, reduces carbon emissions, and it's good for the electricity grid in our local neighborhood because it takes pressure off the grid. So there's a number of reasons that we should move forward with investigating solar for our residential and mixed-use apartment buildings. Now, some of the barriers that we come across, first of all, there are a number of split incentives in Strata. You have owner-occupiers and owner-investors. And that's one split incentive, different priorities from both of those stakeholders. Then another set of split incentives are between an owner-investor and their tenant who might be renting the apartment from them. Now, communication has been quite an issue in Strata, and it's been really heartening in the last 2 weeks to see the New South Wales government pushing for everyone to improve communication in Strata schemes through updating their Strata roles for the purposes of COVID. But over the past year, we've actually had people in Strata schemes adopting messenger platforms, better ways of communicating inside the Strata buildings, and this should be of assistance moving forward and reducing the apathy that we've sometimes seen in Strata. Now, there's a lack of information, and that's the beauty of Inner West Council creating a program like Inner West Go Solar for Strata. It's helping educate the community and get the information out there, correcting some of the items which we're not particularly informed on around solar on Strata buildings, and showing that it is possible to move forward. As Sonia said, Strata buildings are not playing catch up with the residential houses yet. So in the past year, the rate of increase in solar panels has continued to increase on residential houses, but we're still not breaking through and getting sizable increases yet in Strata, but we do think that is about to change.
So Brent, this might be a good time to launch our first poll. We're talking about like the information barriers and the capacity building within Strata. So we're interested to find out what representation our webinar audience represents. So I'm going to launch a question and ask each of the members to select what they represent. So the options are apartment renter, apartment owner-occupier, Strata committee member, Strata manager, non-resident apartment landlord, or other. So whilst they're filling in that, you can continue on, and we'll close the poll in about a minute or so. Thank you, Brent.
Okay, so the opportunity across Australia, we've got 2.2 million apartments. It represents 15% of households. And in particular, what makes the Inner West a really good residential apartment zone for solar is the height of the Strata buildings in the Inner West area. Now, nationally, 62% of Australian apartment buildings are under 4 stories high, which is great for Strata. And even 75% of Strata buildings across Australia are under 5 stories, which is good. But don't rule out any height building getting solar panels. As you know, the new towers at Barangaroo in the CBD, which are some of the tallest buildings in Australia, have solar panels on the roof of them. But as we move forward, a third of new dwellings which are being constructed are apartment buildings. Now, from the perspective of a strata scheme, at present, if you've got money in your capital works fund, you might be receiving 0% interest, and if your money in the capital works funds or part of it's put into a term deposit, you might be getting 0.45%, maybe a really good results, 0.65% interest per annum. Now, if you were to invest that money that's in the capital works fund into a solar system on the roof, and then you converted the energy savings from that solar system back into an interest rate, it could be as high as 14% per annum. And by doing that, you're basically improving the capital management of your capital works fund or your sinking fund. So it's important that we look at this perspective if we're a strata scheme, particularly one that's got money sitting in the capital works fund, a substantial amount of money that is getting a very low and unattractive interest rate.
Great. Well, the results are in from poll 1, Brent, and we have decision makers on the line. So the highest category was the strata committee members, and second followed closely by apartment owner occupiers.
Excellent. So we're talking to the right people today. Now, a question we usually get asked is, how can solar work in an apartment block? People are usually familiar with applying it to the common area meter, but this is a technology innovation from Melbourne in Australia, from the company known as Illume Energy. And it's a model that can actually see a single solar system shared on the rooftop of the building, connecting into the individual apartment meters and decreasing those electricity bills for all the individual apartments. We'll come back and we'll have a little look at that later. Now, just to go over some units of measurement. First of all, a kilowatt is a measure of instantaneous power, and the size of a solar system is measured in kilowatts. For example, you might purchase a 25 kilowatt solar system. The solar system makes direct current, which needs to be transformed into alternating current by a piece of equipment called an inverter. And there is some loss in the conversion from DC to AC. Now, the other unit of measurement is the kilowatt hour. Now, if you look at your electricity bill from your energy retailer, that is measured in kilowatt hours. And if you're thinking about getting a battery, the size of a battery is measured also in kilowatt hours. So a 14 kilowatt hour Tesla Powerwall. Now, a couple of rules of thumb. So what's the relationship in Sydney between, say, the size of a solar system in kilowatts and the energy produced in kilowatt hours? So the rule of thumb is 4 times the amount of energy in kilowatt hours per day is created as the size of the solar system in kilowatts. So a 25 kilowatt solar system might produce 100 kilowatt hours over the course of a day. Now, the next relationship we need to get our head around is the dimensions of solar panels. These have increased in the last year to basically 2 meters by 1 meter. Now, not all solar panels of the same physical size have the same performance. So they don't all output the same amount of electricity per panel. So you might get a 330 watt panel, you might get a 450 watt panel. So if you had 330 watt panels, 330 watt panels would make up 1 kilowatt of the solar system. Now, the highest performance panels are coming onto the market, some of them using what's called bifacial technology. That means they'll actually generate electricity on both the front and the back of the panel if it's on a tilt frame. And that will allow future panels to get to 500 watts or even 600 watts. Now, Another rule of thumb in solar, it's more expensive to install solar on an apartment building than it is on an individual house. And there are government rebates. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But the lifting costs of getting the panels to the roof is one of the drivers of making it more expensive on Strata. But if we look Australia-wide, at real solar quotations on Strata buildings, you might be looking at $1.40 per watt in terms of the cost of the solar system. The solar panels themselves have dropped by a factor of 5 over the last 10 years, which means now the largest proportion of the cost of installing the solar system is becoming the labour. And unfortunately, fortunately, the labour is not decreasing in Australia at the same rate as the solar panel modules. But we had a quick look at the buildings that participated in round 1 of Inner West Go Solar for Strata. And we've broken out what the cost is per watt after the federal government rebate, but inclusive of GST for low rise, medium rise, and high rise. And some of these are a little bit below the Australian average. And what that is showing us is that there are actually a number of apartment buildings in the Inner West area where there is cheaper access to the roof, like quite a lot of strata schemes, sometimes a little bit older building stock, have fire stairs that just open up onto the roof of the apartment building, where a lot of the newer developments don't have that same easy access onto the roof. Now, just to recap, AC-DC was a band. Solar converts from DC to AC. Now, what is feed-in? A solar system will offset your grid import electricity. So you use the solar inside your apartment building first, but if there's any additional that can't be consumed inside the building because there's not enough load or demand inside the building, then this will be exported out to the grid. And you might be paid by your energy retailer between 6 and 21 cents for a feed-in tariff. Just to clarify, feed-in is not a government rebate. It's a private contract between you and your energy retailer. Sonia Williams has produced a new fact sheet as well that talks about the solar tax, which has been mentioned in the media recently. But keep in mind, if feed-in is going to be taxed in the future, one solution is to buy a battery and store that power inside your building and then use it after the sun goes down. Now we're going to go through 4 different solar models, which hopefully cover the bulk of the different types of strata buildings and the types of solar implementations that people on this call might be able to investigate. On the page here, you can just see a 1 kilowatt individual solar system hanging off the veranda of an apartment complex in Balmain. Now, an individual solar system for individual units usually works best in, say, a townhouse complex, maybe a low-rise apartment block that's only 2 or 3 levels high. So don't typically go attempting this in your high-rise apartment complex. But it is a possible model. It really works well, and we've got a separate set of information we'll tell you about for people that might be living in townhouses, because there are a lot of townhouse developments across the Inner West LGA. Now, the second type of solar system that we'll talk about is a solar system where you've got one solar system on the roof and it's connected down to the common area meter and the common load of the building. And this has been the most common type of solar system on a strata building up until this point in time. And we'll just show you here, Revolution Apartments in Marrickville has about an 80 kilowatt solar system on the roof, which is just applied to the common area services within this large strata complex at 359 Illawarra Road. Then The new technology we mentioned earlier from the innovative Melbourne startup called Illume Energy is a solar sharing gateway. This allows one solar system on the roof of the apartment complex to connect into this solar sharing gateway and then connect into individual apartments and potentially the common area as well. If you can think about a solar system on the roof of your apartment complex, and one recent innovation we saw at Bayview in the Northern Beaches was one of these systems went in with 2 levels of buy-in on that could be subscribed for to be paid by individual apartment owners that wanted to participate. They had the option of buying 1.5 kilowatts of the shared solar system or paying a bit more and buying 2.5 kilowatts of the shared solar system. And that would reflect, for example, someone that's working from home and running air conditioning through summer might be more interested in buying a 2.5 kilowatt share of a shared solar system on their apartment roof. But the important thing in that case study from Bayview was that not all the apartments in the apartment complex decided to participate in this arrangement. It was simply opt-in for those that wanted to pay and own a share of a shared solar system for a bunch of apartments on the common area rooftop. If we jump over to 13 to 19 Warren Street in Ryde, here's another example of the shared solar system operating. So you can see 2 of the SolShare units here. That's because each SolShare unit can connect a maximum of 15 residential apartments to it. At this site, there were 17 apartments. So they bought 2 of these boxes, and you can see 2 inverters there next to it as well. So that's sharing a 25 kilowatt solar system amongst 17 apartments. And then the final model that we'll look at is solar for the units and the common areas via an embedded network. And now the people on the call that do have an embedded network are likely to know that they've got this in their building. And that's because you'll be receiving like a custom electricity bill for your individual apartment that might have a different branding from the typical energy retailers that we see in the marketplace. But it's possible to also connect a solar system into an embedded network, and that would share the solar power on a fair, equitable build basis into the individual units as well as the common areas. And one example of such an embedded network with a solar system and a battery system was installed at Sydney University Housing back in 2015. Quite an expensive project to buy a 42 kilowatt hour battery 6 years ago. And so that would actually be a lot cheaper to do that project today, but they're on track that by 2022, the whole system will have paid itself off. Great illustration of solar and battery being tested in the market for 6 years already, in this case also through an embedded network. Now, we're just going to have a look at 2 different payment models that can be considered by a strata scheme. So first of all, owning solar outright. This is usually the best way for a body corporate to purchase a solar system. A capital expenditure or CapEx model, it gives the strata scheme the maximum amount of control over the solar system that's on their roof. Now, keep in mind, the one thing that sometimes confuses people is you might have an energy retailer such as Energy Australia or Origin or AGL providing electricity to your common area meter. Now, it is possible to go to one of those companies and buy a solar system from them, but you have the flexibility to remain with them as an electricity retailer and go and buy from one of the 5,800 other solar installers across Australia that might want to service you as well. The second model that can be considered by a strata scheme is called a power purchase agreement. Now, under this model, you might get an offer like a $0 upfront solar system, but the solar system's actually owned by a third-party company for 10 or 15 years. And during that period of time, you're committing to buy the electricity that comes off those panels, all of the electricity that comes off those panels. And basically, for them to make it attractive to you, they sell it to you just a little bit cheaper than what you can buy the electricity from the grid, your energy retailer who's supplying you today. Now, again, you might be able to get a PPA from your existing energy retailer for the common area meter. You might, or you might go to another company that might provide the solar finance to you. So you've got the flexibility, you can mix and match. But keep in mind, anytime there is some sort of solar finance involved, you're typically not getting the best return on investment. So if you've got the money in the Capital Works Fund, the best financial decision is to always own the solar system outright from day one. But if you don't have enough money in the Capital Works Fund for a solar system right now, remember, you can take out finance for a solar system. And most people would understand that if you can get finance that was at an interest rate of 7% per annum, and you got a return on the solar that's at 14% per annum, then you're netting 7% a year, even if you took out some sort of loan, finance, or power purchase agreement or energy lease for your solar system. A quick note on the federal government rebates. So there's two bands of solar rebates. Virtually everyone in Strata that looks at getting a federal government rebate looks at the small scale technology certificates. And up until when we did this seminar last year, we weren't aware of any Strata schemes that had done a bigger than 100 kilowatt solar system, which meant everyone was in the small scale technology certificates bracket. However, during the year, one Strata scheme in Piedmont installed a 176 kilowatt hour solar system on a Strata building, and that would have been as a retrofit, and that would have been eligible for the large scale generation certificates because it was over 100 kilowatts. And at a new marquee development down in Edmondson Park, a property developer put a 2.5 megawatt solar system on a large apartment and townhouse complex. So that also would have been eligible for the large scale generation certificates. But if we look at a standard house that might be installing, say, a 6.6 kilowatt solar system, you could expect a $3,300 rebate, federal government rebate. The most important thing is that this rebate actually decreases, and it decreases on the 31st of December every year on a schedule that's been dictated up until the year 2030. So here we're just going to have a look at a residential Strata scheme that perhaps got a quote on a 74 kilowatt solar system in 2021. They would be eligible for a $35,000 federal government rebate in 2021. If they waited until 2022, that federal government rebate would drop to $32,000. And if they wait for 5 years, it's down to $21,000. So while people often say, well, we could just put off buying solar panels until next year when they're going to be cheaper, keep in mind that the rate at which the federal government rebates is decreasing is falling faster now than the decrease in the solar panels per year. And as we mentioned earlier, the labor for installing solar panels is not decreasing in Australia. A couple of projects that you might want to consider before putting solar panels down. Solar panels last for 25 years. So you might want to re-waterproof your roof. Here's a before and after shot of a $100,000 triple layer waterproofing job on a residential strata scheme, which was a precursor project. To give you an idea, the solar system that will one day go on that roof will cost less than $20,000. So a lot cheaper to put a solar panel system on the roof than to re-waterproof. Another question we get asked is, we've just done a great waterproofing job on our concrete roof on our strata building. Do we have to penetrate that? And the answer is no. Here's the ARIA building at Waterloo, which uses ballast to weight down the racking system for the solar panels, concrete blocks, holding it down, passing a wind speed safety assessment. However, before you go down this path, keep in mind, it costs you about 1/3 more for a ballast weighted solar system than one that penetrates through the waterproofing on a concrete roof. And you can sometimes get like another 5-year warranty if you penetrate a waterproofing membrane and get people to waterproof around it. You can sometimes get another 5-year warranty from the waterproofer around just those extra bits of waterproofing around the penetration points in the membrane. Another barrier that a number of the older strata buildings are facing is it's time to upgrade the meter board. Here's an example of a meter board that's not compliant to AS3000 standard. It still has some ceramic fuses on it. A good project, foundation project, which helps you with not only solar, but also electric vehicle charging and getting cheaper electricity prices from your energy retailers via smart meters, is to do for the owners corporation to fund doing a meter board upgrade and getting your building ready for that new energy future. Getting panels to the roof is quite a driver of the cost involved in installing solar on strata rooftops. But as we saw in the last iteration of this project, there are a number of strata schemes where you can get the panels safely to the roof without a crane or a hoist, but in some cases that will be necessary. Where you have tree cover, we don't want to cut down trees and reduce the canopy level in the inner west. So one solution, if you've got some shading for part of the day on your roof, is to use microinverters or DC optimizers. This allows one panel in a string to be shaded and to not reduce performance from all the panels in the string. And that's a way of also catering from shading from nearby strata buildings as well as trees. We were asked this year about reflectivity of solar panels. Keep in mind all solar panels come with an anti-reflection coating, which is applied to the surface of each solar panel. So if your panels are visible from another nearby strata scheme, keep in mind that the reflection from solar panels is less than light reflecting off water, trees, or grass. So another innovation developed out of UNSW is the Sunman Solar Skin. This is a flexible, lightweight panel that's about 1/3 the weight of a traditional solar panel. Here you can see it installed on a strata building at Docklands in Melbourne. It can be installed vertically as well as horizontally, but keep in mind you'll still get better performance if it is installed horizontally than vertically. Also from Melbourne, this is an example of a new solar glass construction material called Onyx solar photovoltaic glass. So all the balconies on this building, the glass on those balconies is actually generating solar power. Another question we get asked is about solar tiles. So yes, it's possible. There are 4 local suppliers here in Australia on the screen, as well as the famous Tesla tiles, which are coming to Australia now. Keep in mind the efficiency of some solar tiles is not as good as the dedicated solar panels, and they're also about 3 times the cost. Now, in February 2021, the New South Wales government passed an update to the Strata Schemes Management Act, which was called the Sustainability Infrastructure Amendment to the Strata Schemes Management Act. And basically, here's some text. We won't read through all of it, but it applies to not only solar panels, not just batteries or EV charging, anything that's sustainable or environmentally friendly for the building. And it also applies to any finance that needs to be voted on by your owner's corporation. What it does is it reduces the threshold for being able to pass a motion to proceed with one of these projects from what used to need a special resolution at 75% of unit entitlements down to a threshold based around 50% of unit entitlements. So thanks to the New South Wales government, it just got easier to get support from your owners corporation in a vote of all owners to move forward with a solar or a solar and battery project. Now, a couple of the archetypes that we suggest you need to get onto your Strata committee to make one of these projects successful. What we've seen is where you've got at least two of these different roles on the Strata committee, you've got a better chance of getting the projects through and passed by your Strata building. So the bean counters, your typical accountant, crunching the numbers, showing return on investment. The engineer basically is skilled at procuring equipment from different vendors and analyzing the different proposals that you might have, and the sustainability champion there, driving the community engagement and educating people around moving to renewable energy in the building. So if you've got two of those people on your committee, you've got any two, you've got a better chance than if there's just one of you on the committee pushing the project. Now, just to give you a case study from round one, an apartment block in Camperdown participated in round one of Inner West Coast Solar for Strata. They got their solar feasibility study, and based on the solar feasibility study, they set up a vote at their AGM under the new sustainability infrastructure motion that was brought in by the New South Wales government. And they actually got approval for both solar and batteries from a vote of all owners in their building. And so they also voted to pay for it via a special levy. So that'll be a project that they'll move forward on implementation in 2022. Now, here we've got some criteria for joining Inner West Coast Solar for Strata. Now, basically, we did a scan of the Strata buildings that are in the Inner West LGA, and we looked at building age, roof type and aspect, the orientation of the roof, the size of the apartment block, and the building profile. And basically, as a result of this project, there's now a Google map that's been set up by Inner West Council that actually shows these 200 plus great Strata buildings in the Inner West area that are really good quality candidates. And that's not exclusive. Like there are plenty of other buildings that will be able to put solar panels on, but these top 200 Strata buildings are ones that we would really urge have a look at solar on your Strata scheme, because we've had a good look at what's going on at your building, and there's a level of analysis that's been done on this set of 200 buildings. Now, I might pass back to Sonia.
Yes, I think we might do another poll.
Okay.
Just on a little bit more information around the properties that were included on the solar for Strata target list. Most of the participants in tonight's webinar would have received an invitation letter from Council's General Manager. So we did a direct mail out to all of the residents in each of those properties. We had a number participate in the first round. So yeah, it was less than 200 properties that we mailed to. So I'll now launch our second poll. Having had a look through what's involved in the Strata Committee investigation readiness, we're keen to have an understanding of where you are all at with your solar investigation readiness. So the question really is around time frame.
Sonia, if you're not on the Strata Committee, and you have no idea what the Strata Committee is going to be doing in your block, how do we answer this question?
That's a good question. We don't really have an other for this. Yeah. Maybe, yes, maybe just sit out for this one.
I'll sit out, yeah, because I have no idea. I'm not sure if any of my Strata Committee people actually are in this, you know.
Yes.
So
you're a Strata manager?
No, I'm a owner occupier, so.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Sonia, I have a question too. It says indicate your Strata Committee investigation readiness in the next year. Is that ready to undertake an investigation or what?
That means that if you were to be selected for this program and council provides a solar feasibility assessment and provides the committee with the report, that the response won't be, oh no, we have to do a re-roofing, we have to re-waterproof, we have to repaint, so we'll think of solar in 2 years' time. It's like, do you have any other hurdles ahead that would make investigating or instigating solar or instigating the solar feasibility recommendations?
I'm no expert on our routes, but I'll have a guess.
Yeah, have a guess. We won't hold anyone to it. Okay, does anyone need more time? We'll end that poll. And then the next question is a little bit of a follow-up. If people answered we're not ready straight away, then here are some further information around what would need to happen before solar could be installed. Some properties preference the lower hanging fruit of energy efficiency around LED lighting upgrades first, because if you reduce your electricity consumption, then your solar stretches further. So while people are filling that in, we'll just explain the process. The Solar for Strata web page, at the bottom of it has a registration form. Apologies, you need to double up your information having registered for this webinar, but we'll ask for the Strata plan. And importantly, at the bottom of the registration form is under the terms and conditions that the Strata committee is agreeable to the Strata participating in the program, which means that what block would have access to the common area electricity bills, care of the Strata manager, and that the committee agrees to facilitate on-site visit to look at the electrical infrastructure on site, the switchboards and the meter boards, and that there will be due consideration given to the report at the end of the process. So we've already had up to 15 registration forms submitted. So for any of the others who were wanting to understand a little bit more about the process for this program, if you need to go back and report back to the committee and then have committee representative fill in the form. And a strata manager can register, or a committee member could register. Okay, so we'll end this poll. What needs to happen? Quite a few need to do electrical meter upgrades, as well as passing a solar specific bylaw. That's pretty much common to all projects, unless there's been a bylaw in existence where perhaps a single solar unit holder or townhouse had an individual solar applied for their roof. Okay, so there are the results coming. Okay, back to you, Brent.
Okay, so Sonia's just mentioned, so this form is live and you can find it on the Inner West Council website. Now, the other thing, that there are a number of links to other resources on the Inner West Go Solar for Strata web pages, which are on the council website. In particular, if you're part of a townhouse strata development, there's a separate solar education kit that can help you if, for example, you're just an owner-occupier and you want to apply to your owner's corporation for permission to install a solar system just for your own individual townhouse. So that number of resources, also some videos, including one that it goes deeper into the financial argument for solar on Strata, a white paper, and obviously fact sheets and copies of this presentation as well.
Great. We might launch into questions, Brent, because we've got a few here in the chat. The first question is from Keith, asking roughly how 108 unit strata scheme, small scale or large scale?
Sorry, it just dropped out. The question was
how many kilowatts?
How many kilowatts
might we?
Right. Okay. Look, you know, typically if you had a good roof area, you might put a 39 kilowatt solar system for the common areas on an apartment complex that has, say, 100 units. To give you an idea, an apartment block just 2 doors down the street from me has 40 units, and they put a 30 kilowatt solar system for their common areas last week.
And so, Brent, what determines the size? Like, how do you work out what size you need? You maybe want to talk through.
Sure. So the items that go into the right size solar system for your building are: one, the consumption of the common areas, and under this program, we don't just request the electricity bills from the common area. We also request 2 years of historical metering data every 15 minutes or every 30 minutes if it's available. And that actually shows you how much your common areas are consuming during the peak solar generation period. So a building that's consuming more during the middle of the day, a larger solar system will be appropriate. And quite often, you know, with more heavily serviced buildings, that if you've got pools or common air conditioning units and multiple lifts, you actually will hit a point where you actually can't get a big enough solar system on the roof to offset all the consumption that's going on in the common areas. But in a different setup of building, you might have less of those heavy energy consuming facilities in the common areas, and you might have lots of sprawling roof space. And then we can actually consider more than one solar system, you know, over the next 10 years going onto your roof. So we could look at a smaller common area solar system and potentially one of those Allume solar sharing arrangements. So to give you an idea, we mentioned earlier an apartment complex down at Bayview. they actually installed 2 solar systems on the common property roof at the same time, a 30 kilowatt solar system for the common areas and another 30 kilowatt solar system for solar sharing. So keep in mind, what we're doing is we're looking at 3 or 4 different scenarios. If you've got commercial lots on the ground floor, they might be interested in their own dedicated solar system because they're running air conditioning to, keep a furniture showroom cool during the day or something like that. So what we're looking at is basically you've got how many square meters of available unshaded roof space, what are the different electricity loads on the different electricity meters in the building, and then coming up with looking at the payback on those different solar systems, and then coming up with the right size solar system or the right set of solar systems that might migrate onto your Strata rooftop over the next 10 years.
Okay, thanks, Brent. We'll power through the rest of these questions. The government rebate, is it a one-off payment or is it over a number of years?
So the small scale technology certificates, which apply to 99% of solar systems on Strata, is an upfront rebate net off the quote that you get from the solar installer. The large scale generation certificates is an ongoing rebate where you get, over each year up until 2030, you get part of that payback. So obviously that's why it's more
to 99% of the projects.
Yeah.
So it's really a one-off upfront payment for the federal small scale certificate rebate.
Yep.
The next question is it possible to install a solar system and then at a later date, when it's more financially able, add in the solar sharing gateway?
Yes. So
like a staged approach.
Yes. So for example, the Zinc building in Alexandria already has a 25 kilowatt solar system for the common areas. Now they're planning their 60 kilowatt solar system for the solar sharing as a second project.
Okay. How can the obstacle of split incentives be overcome for rental properties?
Yeah. So first of all, remember there are projects which increase the property value of all the apartments in the building. And even going back as far as 2013, Lend-Lease had done a study that showed that, and over time, you can expect solar panels the recognition of having a solar system, even for the common areas, there is actually a mechanism by which that will gradually impact the property value of every apartment inside the building. So even if you're an owner investor in a building, some of these projects, and I'll give you like a real life example. On the north of the harbour, there's a Strata scheme. If they were to put a 74 kilowatt solar system on the roof, only applied to the common areas, it would actually increase what's called their neighbour's energy rating by half a star, which would translate to a $30,000 increase in the property value of each of the 100 apartments inside that building. But they're very expensive apartments, I will say.
Have you seen any cases, Brent, where the reduction in the common electricity bills has resulted in a discount to owners for strata fees through admin fund reductions?
Yes, and also the other thing to keep in mind is putting a common area solar system on the roof can sometimes reduce the consumption of the common area electricity so much that it actually drops out from being a commercial tariff down to being a small electricity tariff, which means you actually get a second savings kick for the owners corporation, because you can swap out the old commercial electricity meter and put the same meter that you'd have for like a house into that building for
Great.
the common areas.
Great. Another question from Andre is, what role does what block play in the process? I might answer this.
Yeah.
Is it just assessment or are they part of the procurement? So the council feasibility study, which engages what block directly from council, they will cover the solar feasibility. And then if that's where the support ends, then the Strata committee is welcome to engage what block separately if they would like to run a tender, or what block has provided a listing of the top 30 solar installers for apartment buildings, which is on our resources page for Solar for Strata. Or thirdly, council has a free solar quote service, which is also on our website. We'll send these links to all of the residents.
Yep.
So that feeds into another question around, does what block provide any engineering advice, the structure of the roof to support panels?
Yeah, so structural engineering is beyond scope of this current assessment, but we can detail, basically there's a handoff process usually between a solar engineering company and a structural engineer, because basically the structural engineer needs to be able to estimate what the weight of the future solar system is going to be. And basically we can give you in the solar feasibility study what the estimated weight based on the number of panels and the racking system, which you could then independently go to a structural engineer. If, for example, you had wooden crossbeam tiled roof, or keep in mind, it depends on who you select as your solar installer. So this is one of the differences between large commercial solar installers will actually often have that structural engineering capability in-house for when they do their quoting. And that's the difference between a commercial solar installer and, say, a residential solar installer who would typically hand it off to a third-party structural engineer.
Okay. The next question is, could you elaborate on how a system could pay itself off in 7 years? And
Yep.
then, yeah, how would this be impacted by the potential solar export charges?
Yep. So keep in mind, with the rate that batteries are falling, one of the things we do in the solar feasibility study is we actually give you a scenario for the size of the solar system that you would want right now, and another scenario, which is the size of the solar system that you would want to install now, knowing that in 2 years or 3 years, you might want to install a battery when a battery may be cheaper, or the New South Wales government may have brought in a $3,000 rebate against the cost of a $10,000 battery. So, so first of all, when we look at your particular building, we also factor in that over a 25-year lifespan of the solar panels, you probably have one maintenance event where you replace the inverter, usually around 10 to 12 years as well. So we're looking at those items, which are the cost of maintaining the system. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball on what's going to happen with electricity prices in New South Wales. However, if the Liddell power plant, which is currently scheduled for decommission in 2022 or 2023, if that proceeds, it would be reasonable to expect higher electricity prices in New South Wales relative to the electricity prices in the other states of Australia from that point on, after taking out one of the main coal-fired power stations servicing Sydney. So as you know, payback is always calculated based on what electricity prices are. You know, today you can't perfectly crystal ball what's going to happen to the electricity prices, but if you take into account closure of coal-fired power stations, if you take into account that New South Wales might be following the path of South Australia, then you could expect at least more volatility and potentially higher prices. And the solar taxes are not, keeping in mind in a lot of strata buildings, the solar feed-in tax will not be a large impact to that financial forecast.
Yeah, that's a good point. So really, when you're paying a solar system off, the amount you get for exporting it to the grid is tiny compared to the value of you not buying electricity in. So if you're looking at a kilowatt hour, a Strata unit could be paying anywhere from 30 to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So every kilowatt hour that you produce in your solar panels system, you are not buying that in from the grid compared to what you would be charged to export it, being around 6 cents. So really the majority of the payback calculation comes from the amount of solar you use on site. So we have a question around what's the situation with DA and architectural standards? As a waterfront building, can the buildings that stand behind us reject solar panels on aesthetics? I would say that if there are no heritage implications mean that it's preferable to not have the solar panels visible from the main streetscape. I'm not aware of ability to reject solar panels on aesthetics, as Brent has really talked about the glare not being such an issue.
Yep.
Maybe our coordinator of community sustainability might like to add something there. Otherwise, we will have more requests to explain in detail the difference between the solar sharing gateway and the embedded network. And would either of these suit a 2-story 7-unit block, or is option 1, the solar sharing gateway, a better option?
Yeah, so embedded networks are really not feasible in apartment blocks under about 60 lots. So you would definitely go to the solar sharing gateway in a townhouse complex of, say, 7 lots.
Great. And then another request to elaborate on the system from a loom.
Right. So basically, it's been in development over about a 6-year period. It's manufactured locally here in Melbourne. About 50 of them have been installed so far. They just raised another $6 million to export it to the US and Europe and start taking it to those other markets. And it's been used in mixed use. It's been used in shopping centres without any apartments, and it's now, there's 3 sites that we've been closely monitoring here in Sydney, and it's approved in Ausgrid. So it's approved by the grid operator here in Sydney. So it's been a number of years that we've been waiting for it to, move to this point where it's ready for commercial implementation.
Yeah, and we can send an overview video link to all of the participants of this webinar. There are a number of questions that are asking, what is the commitment of the strata committees or the properties once they sign up for the project? And will they be held to having to implement solar in the first year? And if they don't commit in 1 year, are they disqualified? The answer is no. There's no hard and fast locked-in contract. Council will provide the solar feasibility, and our project aim is to facilitate installations. So we're not going to hold properties to it, but we want to encourage actual installation and get people to move quickly, because as Brent also put up the slide, the federal government upfront small scale certificate proportional rebate is very much on a sliding scale. So we also have our Council's climate and renewable strategy with some ambitious targets to increase solar uptake within our community. So we're keen to get runs on the board, and we really want to work with committees that are shovel ready so that we can get some joint results. Another question is what is the process of getting Strata committee members on board for registering for the Solar for Strata Round 2? I would suggest if you don't have, we've put the registration deadline till the end of October to allow people enough time if they have a monthly meeting post this webinar. So I would definitely send an email to the committee or perhaps through the Strata manager just to ask for a general approval, and really the onus, well, the commitment would be the ability to share the electrical information and to host the site visit. And Brent also mentioned not just the electrical bills, but if there is access to the interval data. So what is the process to request a feasibility study? So we just send everybody back to the registration page, and then we will wait till the end of October till all of the entries are in, and then we'll go through and assess. Yes, so if the feasibility report comes back and the committee decides that it's not viable, then they're not locked into continuing. That's right. No, there's no contractual obligation. So the question is, in the context of the Illume system, when you say that owners buy a share of the system, is this an ongoing expense, basically buying the electricity from the strata as it is being produced, or is this a one-off payment from the owners to fund the installation of the system? Great question.
Yeah, one-off payment from the owners to fund their pro rata share of the installation of the system.
Yes, it's not like an embedded network system where you are buying the electricity from the embedded network operator. It's a shared asset that the Strata committee owns. Right. Just looking back. Do we have an estimate of the feed-in tariffs received for solar Strata systems?
Yes. Yep. So we take that into, we do an estimate of the feed-in, and you can see that broken out.
Yeah, but if Daniel was asking, like, what is the range of market feed-in tariffs available?
Oh, okay. Basically from 6 cents to 21 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yep. With the majority of offers down in the lower, the 21 cents is kind of a honeymoon offer, it's special. Great. I think another final question. In a building with an embedded network, do occupiers still have the option to purchase power from a third party?
Yes. Under power of choice regulation, anyone in a building with an embedded network can opt out at any time. They're protected by that regulation.
Great. And then there was a question around DA. Is a DA required by council for a solar installation? Good news on that front. There has been a change to the infrastructure state government legislation, infrastructure state environmental planning policy, and all systems up to 100 kilowatts don't require a council DA unless the property is a listed heritage item or is in a heritage conservation area. And in those cases, we look at the placement of the panels to be not visible from the main street frontage. So it just relies on placement. Okay, final questions. I think we've gone over time just shortly. Right, the question also, who can register for the program? It can be a committee member or an owner-occupier or a strata member. Often it's somebody that has, if somebody is really keen and wants to be the project manager, they have an interest in solar or perhaps have a technical background and they're not on the committee, they can be the conduit or the information. but they would just need to have had approval from the Strata committee that the property is happy to participate. And the question is, does What Block just provide a feasibility report, or will they attend an AGM or committee meeting? And Brent has been to many.
Zoom. So we attend via Zoom. Either your choice of it's up to the individual building. If they usually the Strata committee takes the Zoom that's included with the solar feasibility study to talk through that for 1 hour and just ask more questions directed to your own individual building.
Yeah.
But if you wanted
finally,
most people can't. Yeah, I was just going to say most people can't add an extra hour into the AGM because they're long enough as they are. Yeah. But you're welcome to.
Final question. How does a building get access to 2 years of historical electricity data?
We do the metering data authorization request. After you send us the electricity bill, we send it back to your Strata manager for signing, and then we send it to the energy retailer, and we hope that it comes back within the 20 days that they're meant to provide it to us.
Great. So the answer is the building contacts don't need to worry about that.
No.
What Block will look after it?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much clears up the final questions. I might launch our final poll. It's really how confident do you feel about being able to take the next steps? And what will your follow-up from this webinar be? We did have a question from somebody who's outside of the local government area asking, do we offer these services in Perth? I know, Brent, you're saying there is another equivalent organisation that does a lot of work in Perth. Do you recall?
Yeah. Have a chat to Green Gurus.
The Green Gurus. GRENGURUS.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So we'll end our. Oh, still got more people participating in the poll. Okay, well, I think we've done okay. Only 5% are unsure of next steps. So most people are confident, ready to speak to the Strata committee, or ready to request participation in the trial. So that's encouraging. So yes, I hope the takeaway is that you're sufficiently inspired or enthused to progress further. And yes, I would really encourage buildings that are ready, shovel ready, have sort of done any preliminary work, have got a decent budget, or a proportion of committee members or owner occupiers who are keen, because once the solar feasibility report has been finalised, and even with these new sustainability strata voting measures, it will still need 50% or over 50% majority at the meeting to pass. So lobby your internal contacts and people who you feel might be supportive of investigating solar, and I think that's a great start. Okay, that's probably follow-up. We'll make this recording available, and Brent will supply us with the slides. So we'll make those available to all of the people that participated, and also put up on our Solar for Strata webpage. And I'll send the link to the resources page, and then also for the Illume introductory video. And yeah, we look forward to receiving people's registrations in the upcoming month. Great. So that's, oh, I haven't done the shared result from the poll. Excellent. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll close the recording and thank everybody for their attention and patience. It's dinner time. It's a lot. I know it's a lot to absorb after you've had a busy work day. But thank you everybody for your interest. We're thrilled with the level of interaction and response and look forward to a successful rollout of round 2.